November 8, 1942, 2:47 a.m. George S. Patton stands on the deck of the USS Augusta, watching the coast of North Africa materialize through the darkness. Salt spray hits his face. His ivory-handled pistols rest heavy on his hips. He's 57 years old, and this is his last chance. Behind him, 35,000 American troops prepare for their first major combat operation of World War II, Operation Torch, the invasion of French Morocco. Patton commands the Western Task Force. Everything he's worked for since he was a child comes down to the next 72 hours. But what Patton doesn't know, what he can't possibly know, is that in exactly 18 months he'll be standing in front of Dwight Eisenhower's desk, stripped of his command, publicly humiliated, and told he'll never lead troops in combat again. Everything he'd fought for, gone. And the man who would deliver that verdict, standing right beside him on this very ship. Back to 1909. West Point, New York. George Smith Patton Jr. is 24 years old. He's graduated from the United States Military Academy, finishing 46th in a class of 103. Not brilliant, not distinguished, just another cavalry officer with more ambition than opportunity. But Patton has something else, a vision. He dreams in tanks and artillery. He sees warfare transforming before his eyes. While other officers study Napoleon and read cavalry manuals, Patton devours everything about mechanized warfare, about speed, about the future of combat. His fellow officers think he's obsessed. They're right. For the next 32 years, Patton climbs slowly through the ranks. He serves under General John J. Pershing in the Pancho Villa expedition. He commands the first American tank school in World War I. He watches, studies, prepares. But by 1942, he's still relatively unknown. A colonel with grand theories and expensive tastes who's never commanded a major combat operation. The Army brass looks at his age, 57, and thinks, too old, too reckless, too obsessed with glory. When Eisenhower selects him to lead the Western Task Force for Operation Torch, many in Washington are skeptical. He's a showboat, they say, all polish and no substance. Patton knows what they're saying. He's heard the whispers his entire career. This is his chance to prove them all wrong. Patton's forces storm the beaches of French Morocco. The fighting is chaotic, brutal, confused. French forces, technically allies but under Vichy control, resist fiercely at Casablanca, at Fadala, at Safi. American troops, green and untested, stumble through their first combat. Patton is everywhere. On the beaches, in the command posts, screaming orders, inspiring troops, driving his men forward with sheer force of will. Within 3 days, Morocco falls. American casualties, 584 dead, 837 wounded. But they've done it. America has entered the ground war in Europe, and Patton has proven he can command. The newspapers back home run headlines. Patton leads successful invasion. General's bold strategy secures North Africa. For a brief moment, George S. Patton is a hero. 6 months later, everything changes. Patton now commands the 7th Army. He's racing British General Bernard Montgomery to capture the Italian island of Sicily. The competition is fierce, personal. Patton despises Montgomery's caution, his methodical approach. Patton wants speed, glory, headlines. On July 22, 1943, Patton visits the 15th Evacuation Hospital near Nicosia. He walks through the ward, shaking hands with wounded soldiers. Burns, shrapnel wounds, broken bones. He pins medals on men who can barely stand.
Then he sees Private Charles H. Cool. Cool is sitting on a cot, head in his hands. No visible wounds, no bandages. Patton stops. "What's wrong with you?" he asks. Cool looks up. His eyes are hollow, distant. "I guess I can't take it, sir." Patton's face hardens. "You what?" "It's my nerves, sir. I can't stand the shelling anymore." What happens next takes 5 seconds. Patton slaps Cool across the face with his glove. "You're a disgrace," he screams. "You're a goddamned coward. You're sitting here crying while brave men are dying." He grabs Cool by the collar, drags him toward the tent entrance. "I won't have cowards in my army," Patton shouts. "I'm going to have you court-martialed. I ought to shoot you myself right now." He reaches for one of his pistols. Medical staff rush forward, separate them, pull Cool away. Patton storms out. 1 week later, August 10th, 1943, it happens again. Same scenario, different hospital, different soldier. Private Paul G. Bennett, diagnosed with chronic anxiety and malaria. Patton walks up. "What's your trouble?" Then it stammers. "It's my nerves, sir." Patton explodes. Another slap, more screaming. This time he actually draws his pistol, waves it in Bennett's face. "Your nerves, hell," Patton yells. "You're just a goddamned coward. You're going back to the front lines." Medical officers intervene again. This time, someone takes notes. Someone writes a report. Hospital staff whisper to other officers. Other officers tell journalists. Journalists, embedded with combat units and sworn to secrecy for operational security, sit on the story. But they don't forget. 3 months later, November 3, 1943, radio correspondent Drew Pearson breaks the story on his national broadcast. General George S. Patton, hero of the Sicily campaign, has twice slapped enlisted men suffering from battle fatigue. America erupts. Newspapers run screaming headlines. Patton strikes soldier. General abuses combat troops. Hero or bully. The War Department receives over 1,500 letters demanding Patton's court-martial. Congressmen give speeches calling for his removal. Families of soldiers write to the president. The man who 3 months earlier had been celebrated for capturing Sicily in 38 days is now the most hated officer in the United States Army. Eisenhower's headquarters, Algiers. Patton stands at attention in front of Eisenhower's desk. The office is small, austere. A map of Europe covers one wall. Sicily, recently conquered, is marked with blue pins. Eisenhower sits behind the desk, expressionless. "Sit down, George." Patton sits. His hands, usually so steady, tremble slightly.
Eisenhower slides a folder across the desk. "Have you seen the newspapers?" "Yes, sir." "The Secretary of War wants you court-martialed. So does half of Congress. I've been ordered to relieve you of command." Silence. Patton's entire body goes rigid. Eisenhower holds up a hand. "I'm not finished. You are the best tank commander I have, maybe the best this army has ever had. But you're also reckless, undisciplined, and apparently incapable of controlling your temper." "Those men were cowards," Patton says quietly. "Those men," Eisenhower says, his voice hardening, "were suffering from combat fatigue, a recognized medical condition, and you assaulted them." Patton opens his mouth, closes it. "Here's what's going to happen," Eisenhower continues. "You're going to apologize, publicly, to both soldiers, to every division in your command. You're going to stand in front of thousands of men and admit you were wrong. And then," Eisenhower's expression doesn't change, "and then you're going to sit in Sicily and watch other men plan the invasion of Europe." The words land like artillery shells. Patton sits frozen. 58 years old, 35 years of service, reduced to a spectator. "The invasion of France is the biggest operation in military history," Patton says, his voice barely a whisper. "I should be leading it." "You were supposed to lead it," Eisenhower replies, "but you slapped 2 enlisted then and destroyed your career. You have no one to blame but yourself." Eisenhower stands. The meeting is over. You'll remain in theater. We might need you for diversionary purposes. The Germans respect your reputation. But as far as commanding troops in Operation Overlord, that's finished, George. You're done. Patton stands, salutes mechanically, and walks out. He's required to apologize to every division in the 7th Army, thousands of soldiers assembled in parade formation while their commanding general stands on a platform and admits he was wrong. Some troops boo, others stand in stony silence. At one formation, Patton's voice breaks. "I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong." The newspapers cover every humiliating moment. Patton forced to grovel, once proud general reduced to apologizing. In private, Patton writes letters to his wife, Beatrice. "I am of no value to anyone anymore. Perhaps I should have stayed at that hospital and let the doctors finish me off." He drinks, sits alone in his quarters, stares at maps of France, knowing he won't be there when Allied troops storm the beaches. December 1943 becomes January 1944. Patton remains in Sicily, training troops he won't lead, planning operations someone else will execute. Other generals arrive for meetings about D-Day. Patton isn't invited. He's become a ghost in his own army. In early 1944, Allied intelligence creates a phantom army, the first United States Army group, FUSAG. Fake installations, inflatable tanks, false radio traffic, all designed to convince the Germans that the invasion will come at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. But a fake army needs a real commander, someone the Germans respect, someone they fear, someone whose presence alone would make them believe FUSAG is real. In February 1944, Eisenhower sends a coded message to Sicily. "Report to England immediately." Patton boards a transport plane with no idea what's waiting for him. He assumes he's being reassigned to some administrative post, a desk job, a final humiliation before forced retirement. The plane lands at an airfield outside London on January 26, 1944. Eisenhower is waiting on the tarmac. They drive in silence to SHAEF headquarters, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Inside, Eisenhower finally speaks. "I need you for a special assignment." Patton nods, expecting the worst. "You're going to command an army group based in southeast England. Your job is to make the Germans believe you're preparing to invade Calais." Patton blinks. "A fake army." "A deception," Eisenhower corrects, "but the Germans believe in your tactical genius. If they think you're commanding FUSAG, they'll keep their panzer divisions at Calais instead of Normandy." "So I'm a decoy?" "You're essential to the success of D-Day," Eisenhower says. "Without you, the invasion could fail. Tens of thousands of men could die." Patton is quiet for a long moment. "And after the invasion?" Eisenhower meets his eyes. "If Normandy succeeds, you'll get a real command, 3rd Army. You'll land in France 6 weeks after D-Day and drive across Europe. If you can control your temper, if you can follow orders, if you can prove you've learned something from Sicily." Patton stands, salutes. "I won't let you down, sir." He tours fake installations, gives speeches to non-existent divisions, lets himself be photographed inspecting inflatable tanks. German reconnaissance planes photograph him. German spies report his movements. And in Berlin, Hitler's generals study the intelligence. Patton is at Dover, they report. FUSAG is preparing to invade Calais. Then that's where our panzers must be, Hitler orders. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces storm the beaches of Normandy. 150,000 troops, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, the largest amphibious invasion in human history. And 150 miles away, Patton sits in England listening to radio reports while other men make history. But the deception works. German panzer divisions stay at Calais, waiting for Patton's Phantom Army. For weeks after D-Day, Hitler refuses to send reinforcements to Normandy because he believes the real invasion is still coming at Calais, because Patton is there. Patton finally lands in France. He takes command of the Third Army, currently bogged down in Normandy hedgerows, making minimal progress against fierce German resistance. The British are stuck. The Americans are stuck. Eisenhower gives Patton his orders. Break out of Normandy. Drive east. Don't stop until you hit the German border. On August 1st, 1944, Patton launches Operation Cobra. What happens next changes the war. Patton's tanks explode out of Normandy like a bomb detonating. They move faster than any army in history, 30 miles a day, 40 miles, sometimes 60 miles in a single day. German commanders can't track him, can't stop him, can't even predict where he'll strike next. In 2 weeks, Patton covers 400 miles. He liberates Le Mans, Chartres, Orleans. His Third Army encircles 100,000 German soldiers at Falaise, the entire German Seventh Army destroyed. The newspapers that had called for his court-martial 9 months earlier now run different headlines.
Patton unleashed. Third Army races across France. Germany's nightmare returns. By September 1944, Patton has driven through France, across Belgium, into Luxembourg. His tanks sit 75 miles from Berlin. He sends a message to Eisenhower. Give me the gasoline and I'll have you in Berlin in 48 hours. But Eisenhower, cautious and methodical, diverts fuel to British General Montgomery for Operation Market Garden instead. Patton is forced to halt. He sits in his headquarters, furious, while Montgomery's operation fails spectacularly. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Hitler launches a massive counteroffensive. 200,000 German troops punch through American lines in a desperate attempt to reach Antwerp and split the Allied armies. The Battle of the Bulge. American forces are surrounded at Bastogne, cut off, outnumbered 5-1. At SHAEF headquarters, Allied commanders panic. It'll take weeks to organize a counterattack, they say. Bastogne will fall before we can relieve it. Eisenhower turns to Patton. How long would it take you to disengage from the Saar, wheel your entire army 90 degrees north, and attack the German flank? Every general in the room knows this is impossible. Patton's Third Army is currently fighting a major offensive 100 miles south of Bastogne. To disengage 3 entire corps, 250,000 men, thousands of vehicles, turn them 90 degrees and attack in a completely different direction in winter conditions would take weeks of planning. Patton looks at the map. 48 hours. The room goes silent. It's impossible, a British general says. It's never been done, another adds. Patton smiles. Then I guess I'll be the first. He's moved 250,000 men, reorganized his entire supply chain, and launched a major offensive in the middle of winter. Military historians will later call it the most impressive logistical achievement of World War II. On December 26, 1944, Patton's 4th Armored Division breaks through to Bastogne. The siege is lifted. The German offensive collapses. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last gamble, is over. And George S. Patton, the man who was told he'd never command troops again, has saved the Allied campaign in Europe. Patton's Third Army reaches the Rhine River, the last natural barrier before Germany itself. Other Allied armies are still planning their crossings, building bridges, assembling pontoons. They'll cross in April, they say, maybe May. Patton doesn't wait. At 10 p.m. on March 22nd, without fanfare or announcement, Patton sends the 5th Infantry Division across the Rhine in assault boats. By dawn, they've established a bridgehead. Patton calls Eisenhower. "I've crossed the Rhine." "When are you planning to cross?" Eisenhower asked.
I already have, last night. Don't tell the press. I want to surprise the Germans. Then Patton does something characteristically theatrical. He walks to the middle of the pontoon bridge his engineers have built, stops, unzips his pants, and pisses into the Rhine. I've waited a long time to do that, just like William the Conqueror, he tells his staff. Patton's Third Army drives deep into Germany. They liberate Ohrdruf, one of the first concentration camps Allied forces discover. Patton, who has seen every form of combat horror, walks through the camp and vomits. "We're fighting the right enemy," he tells his officers. "Now I know why we're here." His tanks capture hundreds of German cities. They move so fast that German commanders surrendered to avoid being overrun.